Hello everyone, hope you're doing great. Today we are going to talk about a specific question, and that is overall text structure. Now, overall text structure is a very special question, and it's a very different one. Why? Because it focuses on the order of the passage, right? Now, when we talk about different questions, when we talk about central idea, when we talk about purpose questions, when we talk about other questions, those questions, they basically more or less, they focus on the idea of the passage. They focus on, what the passage is talking about. That is what is important, right? Now, when you talk about the structure question over here, what's being talked about in the passage is important. It's obviously relevant. The content is very important. But other than that, other than the content, what's important over here is the structure of the passage. Now, structure of the passage, what do I mean by that? We have to see what is written in the passage. But other than that, along with that, we have to also see in which order is it written, and that is how we have to select the option as well. So for example, if a passage talks about the importance of giving the SAT, and it talks about, admissions in universities first, and then it talks about scholarships, right? So the option that you're going to take as your answer has to have, both of these two elements in that very particular order. In other words, if you take an option that has, for example, scholarships first, and then, it talks about the admissions, that is going to be a wrong answer. Although the content over there is going to be correct, the content over there is going to be the same. So we need the correct content, and we have to have that content in the very order that has been presented in the passage, right? So order and content or order, right? So both of these things have to go hand in hand, and you have to remember that very well, right? If you have to excel on this question, right? So I have with me over here one question that we are going to read, and then we are going to see how we get to the answer, right? So let's start with this. So it says, using NASA's powerful James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, Mercedes Lopez Morales and colleagues measured the wavelengths of light traveling through the atmosphere of WASP-39b, an exoplanet or planet outside our solar system. Different molecules absorb different wavelengths of light, and the wavelengths measurement showed the presence of carbon dioxide, CO2, in WASP-39b's atmosphere. Now, till here, if you try to understand this, the passage has talked about a method that the scientists use, that Mercedes used, and through that message or through that method, they got to a conclusion that CO2 was present in this particular planet. That is what they are talking about, right? And following this, if you read the next sentence, it says the finding not only offers the first decisive evidence of CO2 in the atmosphere of the exoplanet. So this is the first decisive element, that is its significance. And secondly, it also says that it also illustrates the potential for future scientific breakthroughs held by JWST. So it is currently something very important, and it is giving a green signal to the breakthroughs that are going to come ahead. In other words, the first part is what they came across. The first part is about what they discovered, and the second part is talking about how it was important. So these are the two things that they have talked about in this passage. Now let's read the question. Now the overall structure question or text structure question looks something like this. It says, which choice best describes the overall structure of the text, right? So there are two things. Number one, overall. Number two, structure. So I told you in structure, you have to, see two things, content and order. These are the two things that you have to see. And the second word that is important is overall. That is why I am giving so much emphasis on the word overall, because you have to see the entire passage. So for example, if you have an option that has the correct content and it has the correct order as well, but it only talks about the first half of the passage, or it does not take into account the entire passage, then also that question is going to be wrong. So this is how it's going to be. So let's read the options. We know what has happened in this passage. We know what's going on. The first part has talked about the important discovery, or how they came through it. And the second part is talking about how it was important or significant. So we have to look for something relevant. So if you look at the first option, it says, it discusses a method used by some researchers. Okay, this is fine. They have talked about a method that the researchers use. Then it states why an alternative method is superior to it. So they have, on the first place, never mentioned an alternative method, let alone talking about how it can be superior to it. And then it does not talk about the importance of that, the importance of their discovery. So obviously it stays or it leaves it incomplete. So option A over here cannot be the answer, as opposed to, what we have already talked about. And guys, it's always important when you're doing these questions that you work out your own answer to some extent before going to the option. That will help you a lot in eliminating the wrong options, right? If you just read the passage and without working out your own answer, or without properly understanding the passage, you move on to the options, it may cause you problem, and it may, distract you, and it may, trap you in the trick questions and trick options, and you might not get to the right answer. Anyhow, moving on. So if you look at option B, it says, it describes how researchers made a scientific discovery. Yes, it talks about how they made a scientific discovery. And secondly, then it explains the importance of that discovery. So this very well can be the answer, because firstly, they discovered that there was CO2 on that exoplanet. And secondly, how it was an evidence of that, and it is giving a green signal of the further breakthroughs. So that is how it is important. So they have given the importance, and they have talked about the discovery, and it has to be in order, because first they have talked about the discovery, and then they have talked about its importance. The importance was not there first, so we have to go in that order. And this B, I'm not taking it as the answer right now, but it very well can be the answer unless we have something better than this, right? So let's read option C. Option C says, it outlines the steps taken in a scientific study and then presents a hypothesis based on that study. So it's not a hypothesis, it's a proper conclusion, and then we have the significance to that as well. So this becomes completely irrelevant. Then you come on to option D. It examines how a group of scientists reached a conclusion, right? So it talks about how a group of scientists reached a conclusion, and then shows how other scientists have challenged that conclusion, right? So they have, talked about that as well. So this won't be the answer as well, because, it is not about a group of scientists, and then, it has not talked about the other group of scientists. It's only about the discovery and how it was important. So considering what has been talked about in the passage, considering what is there in the passage, you have to understand that it's only option B that can be the answer. It is only option B that we can take on as the answer over here. So this is why, based on the order and the context of the passage, we are going to take this as the best answer. This is how we solve the structure questions. You have to take into account what is written, and you have to take into account in what order it is written. This is something that will not happen in any of the questions. The order might go the other way around, and it won't be a problem, and the answer may also be correct, as we'll talk about when we talk about other questions. But this is how, you can ace it. And if you just understand what order 2-3 things are, written, and what is the context, you can do these questions very quickly. In my opinion, the overall structure questions or the overall text structure questions are relatively easier. The purpose questions, they demand much more attention, but these questions are relatively easier. So I hope you guys are practicing for your test. Make the most of this, make the most of all of these approaches, and get that improvement that you want. Best of luck. Thank you so much.